even if it hurts. Honestly,
there was a time where we went to visit family members' church, and we turned around to see several congregation members laying holy hands on our son and praying for him. And it hurt. There was kind of that kind-heartedness in the congregation, but also, for lack of a better word, ignorance.
I remember when I was in high school in Uganda, if I was going for counseling, I wouldn't mention it to anyone. This is kind of hush-hush. You don't tell anybody you're going for counseling because the word is you're mad. It's not mental health. Forget mental health. Like they say, a few nuts are off.
That's my mom, and she's right. I grew up in a religious and cultural context that was devoid of a healthy framework for understanding mental illness or disability. We either never talked about it at all, or if we did, it was over-spiritualized. Now that I'm a father raising a child with a disability while living with clinical depression, this is deeply personal. Although I appreciate the intent of those who've prayed that God would heal my daughter of Down syndrome, it is the implication that she's somehow deficient or worse, less than human, that really stings. Our loved ones who live with exceptionalities don't need to be cured or healed to be human. They bear God's image and are fully human as they are. At least that's what I believe.
As a parent, you want the very best for your child. But then when you get a diagnosis, you want to lean on your community for support. When I was raising Isaiah, I noticed that there was something different about him at 18 months. Trying to communicate that to my family and my religious community came with a lot of advice. You need to pray harder. You need to believe God for his healing. As a Christian Black woman, sometimes the comments I received really weighed on me. Okay, I thought I prayed over my child, so what did I do wrong?
In the Black community, when you think about terms like disability and mental health, we don't talk about it in the same way that it's talked about in mainstream society.
There is this unfortunate pattern of understanding or reaction to disability and mental illness that sees it as a curse and sees it as something to be kept out there. So this is whether you're directly from the continent, African American, African Canadian, African Caribbean.
In Uganda, depression, autism, such things were not kind of brought in the open. For example, children have no business getting depressed because they have a roof over their heads. They're being looked after. What are they getting depressed over?
We were one of the first families in our church with a child with a disability, but it's not a quiet disability. He's not restricted mobility-wise. It's harder to contain him. And so when he's running around and he's curious and he lacks language and he looks able-bodied, people don't understand.
Sometimes it's also denial. So I see that as well. People thinking, well, this is going to go away if we, pray it away and that kind of thing. And so it's a lot of cultural and religious influences sometimes.
In our own example, it wasn't viewed as a gift from God. It made us feel like it was a curse, having a child with a disability. It was something that needed to be almost like a demon possession that had to be prayed out.
So within our communities and our cultures, there's a lot of stigma when it comes to somebody having a disability or even dementia or any chronic diagnosis. Sometimes there's what's called, a religious determinism in the sense that perhaps God is punishing this person.
They start blaming the neighbors, that the neighbors are, sent some kind of what they call juju. And usually neighbors or family members who may not like you is normally blamed for the child's condition.
It makes it difficult for families caring for that child to navigate that family dynamic. And so sometimes it's better to just be away which means you're not getting that support.
And so I think that actually increases the sense of isolation, that increases the stress. So it's this kind of almost, double-edged sword, because you might go for help and not be able to get the help that you need. But even when you try to reach out for help, you might experience shame and stigma.
I feel like communities sometimes don't see that their criticisms become a weight or a burden that the parents will carry for the rest of their lives. When you leave that scene, they're still going to try to figure out how to piece your advice and their feelings together in order to make sense of what they need to do for their child.
It took me a while before I could comfortably share with loved ones that I was struggling with depression, and perhaps even longer to acknowledge this reality within myself. For a while, I felt so much shame about my condition that I avoided social interactions altogether. Now, it would be unfair to suggest that my cultural upbringing alone is the source of the shame I still feel. There are so many reasons for this, but this is an important one.
I think of the passage in the Bible, and it's still my go-to where my son is concerned, where the man is born blind. And the disciples asked Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus' response is, neither sinned, but this happened so that the power of God may be displayed in his life. And so as a child of the Black diaspora, I plead, please educate yourselves.
Disability is something that is not a curse from God. If you see it as a curse,
Yes.
then you will actually miss it.
Yes.